Hello everybody, this is me Umanga Vata. Today I am here with my interpretation of this wonderful international bestseller titled Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In. This book remains one of the highly popular bestseller in the field of negotiation. Hope I will be able to satisfy your queries with my interpretation of this masterpiece. Ladies and gentlemen, so many times we hear that the books transpose us to a different universe. They take us to a different land, to a different language, and fill up our brains with different set of ideas altogether. However, here is a book which brings us back to the realities of our day-to-day life. Strikingly, it reminds us all of the daily conversations, agreements, disagreements, satisfactions, compromises, bargains we have in our day-to-day life. For me, personally, this book reminded me of a friend whom I have known since the last 10 years. Let me just share his little story for all of us. Fast forward to 10 years back, when I was doing my bachelor's in Bengaluru, I met a chap named Govind Prasad Gupta. Govind in short. He and I were as normal as any of us, but there was one particular quality that he had. Let me just share a small incident with you. Once, Govind and I were bargaining for a complete two-way round trip around a place called Yalanka in Bengaluru. The auto driver was demanding rupees 120, while the max we both had altogether was rupees 80. The bargain went on for some minutes. As you know, I was just a mute spectator who witnessed out of earth bargain. Do you know at what price the auto driver finally agreed to? You can make a guess. After minutes of negotiation, the auto driver agreed to rupees 60 for 2 trips, nearly half of the price that he initially sought for. Just like you all, I too was in an awe. Let us forget this bargaining skill. Wherever this man, Govind Gupta, went by, to any stranger he talked to, could easily get a favor out of them. It may have meant that he provided a favor to them later on, but he was so easy with strangers, with new people, with dealings and agreements. Going through this book made me realize the wonderful techniques that Govind Gupta had within him. Having known him for nearly a decade now, I thought it was just some magical skills that he possessed within his genes. But now I realize that there are some techniques which can be learned by all of us. It was some sort of belated enlightenment for me. Particularly, I'll be going through 3 main parts. The first part focuses on the 4 basic principles. The second part would focus on the situations when we feel totally helpless. The technique of jitsu will come here. And the third part focuses on an example which combines all the things that we will discuss. Going to the first part of principles, we have 4 basic, very easy day-to-day life principles. 1. Separate people from the problem. Many a times we get frustrated with the people, but we shouldn't be angry with the people. What it does is makes us more egoistic, forget about having a bad relationship. It generates negativity within us, pushes our ego. Let me just share with you a beautiful example from the book. Suppose you are having a discussion with your friend in front of the sun. Then instead of attacking your friend by saying such as you made me sit in front of the sun, you could focus on the problem that the sun is hitting your eyes. Could we just shift somewhere else? See what a life-saving thing. Just separate people and the problem. Separate it. Coming to the second of the 4 principles, we need to focus on our interests rather than our positions. If each party takes its positions in a deal and then just focuses on them, the final agreement will be one between the positions. While doing so, we may lose focus from our main point of interest. Say for example, you go to a fruit seller, you plan to buy bananas, you see the bananas, you find 1 or 2 bananas good, then you bargain for a dozen of bananas. The shopkeeper might say some certain price X, you might say some certain price Z, and you might reach a between price Y. But while doing so, you might lose focus from the interest of all the bananas that you have purchased or that you are planning to purchase. Remember, the focus is on the interest. Do not be blinded by the positions that you take. Third principle is having all your options ready. While reaching your negotiation, there might be different directions, there might be different options that you might have to go through. Keeping in mind all those different places, and most importantly, knowing the banta comes as a lifesaver. Many of you might be thinking, what does a banta mean? A banta is the best alternative to negotiated agreement. In simple words, it is the final option or the final choice that you are left with when no agreement or no favorable agreement is reached. Not only your banta, you should also be aware of the other party's banta. Let me just share a short example for you. Once a bank got defaulted on its payment by a fuel or a gas company. They went into negotiation. While the bank had its banta of getting an equity into this fuel company, the fuel company just kept on playing along. What the bank missed was the hidden banta of the fuel company. The fuel company just wanted to take time before the prices of fuel rose up and it could start paying back the interest. Having the options known not only of you but also of the other party, and most importantly, the proposed agreement should be better than the other party's banta. If their option of going out of the agreement is more profitable to them, they will surely skip out. Now we reach the 4th basic principle. The 4th basic principle being measure the layers. Be objective with the layers or the components or the parts. For this, let me share the example of an insurance agent who was only willing to pay, or an insurance company agent who was only willing to pay $6,000 for a car crash, while the client wanted much higher. The insurance company had reached the price based on the market price of second-hand cars of the same model. Here, what the client does is asks the mileage mentioned. While the second-hand car advertised has a used mileage of 80,000, the new car had only a used mileage of 25,000. Then he goes into details of the radio or the music stereo component. Here too he had an advantage. At last the deal gets settled at above $7,000. This is just a rough version of the complete example given in the book. You see, these 4 principles are the basic life-saving ones. First, separate people from the problem. 2, focus on your interest, not on your position. 3 was having the options ready. Most importantly, being fully aware of yours as well as the other party's banta, and having your partner. Most importantly, having proper awareness of your as well as the other party's options, especially the partners. The partner of the other party must be lesser than the agreed upon interest, else the other party might back out. Similarly, the 4th point was to be made to have a measurable specific information in different layers and components. These were the 4 basic principles. Now coming back to another portion of our review, many of us might think, wow, so easy points, but what to do when the real life situations are very, very, very tough? You know, sometimes the other person might be delaying the deal, or might be playing good police, bad police, or might be totally unwilling to listen to you. Here comes the Japanese technique of jitsu, which means to have a restrained protection. We can use either silence or questioning, or even going to different drafts and using a third party. Here in jitsu, a third party becomes highly welcome. The book gives an wonderful example of the deal or a peace agreement between Iran and Egypt. Iran had captured some part of Egypt in 1960s, and in the 70s, when both these countries were in a good relationship, Egypt wanted the land back, but a negotiation was not being reached. Here, US played the role of mediator, and you might be amazed by the number of times US went through the draft proposal. It was not once or twice or thrice or 4 or 5 or 6 times. US prepared or improved its draft 22 times until there was no place for improvement. It's an example of jitsu. We have now reached the last and the main example, which combines the above all principles and gives us the best revision. The example is of a tenant who lives with his partner in an apartment in US. After 6 months of moving in, he realizes he and his partner are being overcharged. While the maximum ceiling price in the state as per law was $450, their owner was charging them $600. Here, the tenant applies the principle of jitsu. The tenant perfectly, seamlessly makes use of the silence, the questioning, and going through different stages. What he never forgets to apply are the four basic principles. Let us go one by one with the principles. While talking to the owner, the tenant is always kind, the tenant is always grateful to the owner for providing them with the apartment so quickly, so easily. Going back to our number two principle, focus on the interest, not on position. The tenant pleads to talk only on the basic of legal principles and nothing else. The tenant doesn't have any personal issue with the owner, and every time the owner gets angry and reminds them of how helpful the owner had been, he is always thankful and reminds back the owner of the legal principle in the state. He communicates to the owner that he doesn't want to be committing a crime by overpaying than the legally permitted ceiling. Going back to the third point of options, the tenant clearly knew either he could go to the court or stay in the apartment and follow the policies of the state law, but both of them were time consuming or costly to him. So his last banta was to move out immediately after the end of the month. Coming back to the fourth measurable specific components, whenever the owner said that it was a fair price, he asked or went into the components. He questioned the owner. Even if you have charged the price for repainting, you could have charged us some dollars more. Or if you are talking about fitting the bathroom or restroom components, most of them were damaged by the time they had come there. Neither were some lights working either. This is how it goes into specific measurable components. And to all of our delight, the owner finally agreed to pay back the extra charges, while the negotiator also allowed face saving. Remember, separate people from the problem. Face saving to the owner by respecting the owner and by agreeing to move out soon as the month ends. What a beautiful example. Followed jitsu, followed the four basic principles, separated people from the problem, allowed measure face saving, or focused solely on the interest and not on the position. Similarly, was well aware of the different options and partners. Most importantly, focused on specific measurements. What an example, isn't it? At the end, this book gives us ample clarity of such an complex art with such ease and flow. For me personally, how seamlessly this book brings us to the practical skills, the ease with which this book introduces us to these skills and these learnings of such a complex art deserves an ovation by itself. While for me, this book did something which I had never imagined of. This book gave me the pleasure of stripping my friends' negotiation techniques. Remember Govind Gupta? I had fun stripping out all his techniques by the help of this book. At the very least, I will be able to separate the people from problem in my day-to-day life. Thank you guys. The like and subscribe button.